There is a moment most people never forget. Maybe it was a phone call you were not expecting, a bill that arrived at the worst possible time, a job that suddenly disappeared, or a single number on a medical form that changed everything about your next few months. In that moment, you did not need motivation. You did not need a financial plan or a savings goal or an inspiring quote. You needed money, available, right now. And if it was not there, you already know what happened next. The panic, the phone calls, the borrowing, the decisions you made not because they were smart, but because you had no other choice, and the quiet weight of those decisions that stayed with you long after the emergency was over. Here is what nobody tells you about that experience. The emergency was not the real problem. The real problem was what was missing before the emergency ever arrived. Most financial content will tell you to save 3 to 6 months of expenses. They will say it once, quickly, and then move on, as if knowing the rule is the same as being able to follow it. As if the only reason people do not have savings is because they have not heard the advice yet. That is not why people struggle. And this video is not going to treat you like it is. What we are actually going to talk about today is why emergency funds fail even when people genuinely try to build them. The psychological patterns that quietly drain savings without anyone noticing, and a framework built around how real people actually think and behave that makes financial protection something you can genuinely build, regardless of your income level or where you are starting from. If you have ever tried to save and watch the money disappear before it could become anything real, this was made for you. My name is AR. Welcome to AR Investor. Let us get into it. Before we talk about how to build an emergency fund, it helps to understand what you are actually building and why it matters beyond the obvious. Most people think of an emergency fund as a pile of money sitting in an account doing nothing. That framing is one of the biggest reasons people fail to prioritize it. Here's a more accurate way to think about it. Every day that you go through life without a financial buffer, you are operating under invisible pressure. That pressure affects the decisions you make. When your car needs a repair and you have no savings, you do not make a rational financial decision. You make a desperate one. You borrow at high interest. You skip something else important. You experience stress that lingers long after the repair is done. Now imagine the same car repair happening, but this time you have money set aside specifically for moments like this. The situation is identical. The cost is identical. But your response is completely different. You handle it. You move forward. You do not accumulate debt. You do not lose sleep. The emergency fund did not change the emergency. It changed you inside the emergency. That is what financial protection actually does. It does not prevent problems from happening. It changes how you experience and respond to problems when they arrive. And that shift, from reactive to calm, has compounding effects on every financial decision you make afterward. With that understanding, let us now walk through the framework that actually builds this kind of protection. The first obstacle most people face when building an emergency fund is not the saving itself. It is the vagueness around what the money is for. When money sits in an account without a clearly defined purpose, the brain quietly treats it as available. And available money has a way of becoming spent money, slowly, gradually, through a series of small decisions that each feel reasonable in the moment. This is a stressful week and I really need a break. That counts as an emergency. The sale ends tomorrow and I will not see this price again. That is practically an emergency. I have been working hard and I deserve this. This is an exceptional situation. This is not weakness or poor character. It is how the human mind works under pressure. When rules are vague, justifications fill the gap. So the foundation of a working emergency fund is a written, specific definition of what that money is permitted to cover. Not a mental note. Not a general idea. A real, defined list. Genuine emergencies typically fall into a small number of categories. Unexpected medical expenses that cannot be postponed. Loss of income through job loss, reduced hours, or inability to work. Critical home repairs that affect safety or basic function. A broken heating system in winter. A roof that is actively leaking. Essential vehicle repairs if transportation is necessary for work. Urgent family responsibilities that arise unexpectedly and cannot be deferred. Notice what is not on that list. Sales. Travel. Upgrades. Gifts. Even things that feel urgent in the moment. Replacing a phone that still works. Covering a social event that costs more than expected. Filling a gap in a budget caused by overspending elsewhere. When you define the list clearly, the fund becomes protected by rules rather than by willpower. And rules hold much better than willpower when life gets stressful. Write your definition. Keep it somewhere visible. Return to it when a moment arises where spending from the fund feels tempting. There is a common psychological trap in financial goal setting. The larger the goal looks at the beginning, the less likely most people are to begin at all. If someone has no savings and is told they need $8,000 in a dedicated emergency account, the natural response is often paralysis. $8,000 is not just a number, it is a mountain when you are standing at the base with empty hands. And here is what happens. People tell themselves they will start saving when they earn more, when expenses settle down, when life becomes less complicated. That moment very rarely arrives on its own. Life does not naturally become simpler. it becomes different with new complications replacing old ones. The solution is to break the entry barrier by starting with an amount that feels almost too small to be meaningful. $20 a week, $50 from a single paycheck, whatever amount your current situation can genuinely sustain without creating new financial stress. This might sound ineffective, but it accomplishes something important that the large goal cannot accomplish. It starts the habit. Habits are the actual mechanism that builds savings, not intention, not motivation, not waiting for the right moment. The habit of regularly directing a portion of income toward protection is what eventually produces a meaningful fund, and small, consistent habits compound. $20 a week is just over $1,000 in a year. $50 per paycheck across 12 months is $1,200. These amounts are not the finished fund, but they represent real protection that did not exist before. And crucially, they represent a person who has developed the identity of someone who saves, which makes every future step easier. Start smaller than seems logical. Build the habit first. The amount will grow naturally as the habit becomes established. Here is a truth about human behavior that most financial advice fails to account for. People are not consistent. We have high-energy weeks and exhausted weeks, motivated periods, and periods of fatigue, months where everything feels possible, and months where even small decisions feel like too much effort. An emergency fund strategy that depends on consistent motivation, regular manual transfers, or remember good intentions is a strategy designed to fail during the very periods when life is most demanding, which is precisely when good financial habits matter most. The solution is to remove yourself from the equation as much as possible. Automation is not a shortcut. It is the actual strategy. When savings are directed automatically, a transfer that happens on the same day income arrives, before the money becomes visible in a spending account, the decision is made once and then never needs to be made again. There is no monthly moment of temptation. There is no weighing of this month versus the fund. The system runs quietly, consistently, without requiring attention. This approach works precisely because it does not depend on how you feel on any given day. If your bank or financial institution offers automatic transfer options, and most do, setting one up is worth prioritizing above almost every other step in this process. The size of the transfer matters far less than the consistency of the system. One steady, automatic transfer will outperform many manual transfers made with good intentions. Build the system once. Let the system do the work. This next point addresses something that sounds almost too simple to matter, but in practice it changes behavior significantly. When emergency savings and spending money live in the same account or even in accounts that are easily accessible from the same app, the boundary between them is psychological rather than structural. And psychological boundaries are fragile. When you check your balance and see $700, your mind processes that as $700 available. Even if $300 of that was designated for emergencies, the visibility of the combined amount changes how the money feels. Proximity creates access. Access creates temptation. Temptation under stress creates withdrawals. The remedy is physical and structural separation. A dedicated account, ideally at a different institution than your primary spending account, creates real distance. When accessing the emergency fund requires deliberate, separate action, it introduces a pause between the impulse and the transaction. That pause is where better decisions happen. The account itself should be as uninteresting as possible. No attached debit card that makes spending easy. No rewards programs that make the account feel like an active financial tool. No notifications that keep it visible in your daily awareness. A quiet, stable, slightly inaccessible account that simply holds protection until protection is genuinely needed. Boring is a feature, not a flaw. The more forgettable the account is day to day, the more reliably you will be there when it truly matters. In investing, the goal is growth. Money should be working, earning, compounding over time. This is an important principle for building wealth over the long term, but emergency savings operate under a completely different set of rules. An emergency fund is not an investment. It is infrastructure. And the most important quality of infrastructure is that it is reliably there when it is needed, not that it produces the highest possible return. Consider what happens when emergency money is placed into accounts or instruments where the value can fluctuate. An investment portfolio that was worth $4,000 in January might be worth $3,200 in March when the car breaks down. The fund that was supposed to provide certainty during an unpredictable moment has now introduced additional uncertainty. Instead of covering the repair, the person faces a choice between selling at a loss or taking on debt anyway. The stability of the emergency fund is what gives it its actual value. A fund that is certain to be available, in full, immediately, removes the need for panic decisions. And calm, deliberate decisions are almost always cheaper than panicked ones. The right time to optimize and invest is after protection already exists. The priority order matters enormously. Build the floor first, then build the ceiling. Emergency fund advice tends to be delivered as a single destination. Save 3 months of expenses. Save 6 months. Reach the number and the work is done. The problem with single destination thinking is that it creates a long period of feeling like a failure before you ever succeed. If your goal is 6 months of expenses and you have saved 2 weeks worth, you are technically succeeding. The habit is working. Protection is growing. But if the only measure is the final destination, none of that progress registers emotionally. This disconnection between effort and reward is one of the main reasons savings momentum collapses in the early stages. A more effective approach is to define meaningful milestones along the way and to genuinely acknowledge when each one is reached. Your first milestone might be 1 week of basic expenses. That amount of savings means that if something small went wrong tomorrow, you could handle it without going into debt. That is real protection. The next milestone might be 1 month, then 3 months, then 6. Each milestone represents a genuine improvement in your financial security, not just a step toward a future goal. Each one deserves to be recognized as an achievement in itself. Progress that is noticed continues. Progress that goes unacknowledged tends to stall. Build the milestone map. Celebrate each one honestly. The forward movement that results will be more consistent than striving for a distant finish line alone. For some people, the most discouraging period of having an emergency fund is the long stretches where nothing happens with it. Months pass. The money sits there. Life continues without a major disruption. And a thought begins to form. What is the point of this? I could have used that money for something. I could have invested it or paid down debt faster or taken the trip I have been putting off. This feeling is understandable, and it is also based on a misunderstanding of what the fund is doing during those quiet periods. An emergency fund does not become valuable only when it is used. It is creating value every single day that it exists. Think of it this way. Insurance on your home or vehicle provides no obvious return in months where nothing goes wrong. But you would not argue that the insurance has no value because it has not been used recently. Its value is in what it prevents, the massive financial disruption that would occur without it. An emergency fund works the same way. On every ordinary Tuesday when nothing goes wrong, that fund is quietly ensuring that if something did go wrong, your life would not be significantly derailed. It is reducing the probability of high-interest debt, forced financial decisions, and the cascading consequences that follow financial crises. That protection has real financial value, even when it is invisible. The absence of financial emergency is one of the most underappreciated outcomes a person can create for themselves. Here is an observation worth sitting with. Emergency funds are not usually depleted during true emergencies. They are most often depleted during emotional moments that feel like emergencies. There is a significant difference between these two situations. A true emergency has urgency, unavoidability, and consequences that cannot be delayed. An emotional emergency feels like all of those things, but the feeling is being generated by stress, fatigue, frustration, or fear rather than by genuine circumstances. I am exhausted and I cannot keep going like this. I need a break and it needs to be now. This relationship is falling apart and spending money feels like the only thing that helps. I have been so responsible for so long, I have earned the right to just enjoy this. These moments are real. The feelings are real. The need for relief is real. But withdrawing from an emergency fund to address emotional exhaustion is not a solution. It is a temporary comfort with a real cost, and that cost often compounds. The most reliable protection against emotional borrowing is a pre-made decision. Before any stress arises, write down the situations that qualify for fund access. When a moment of temptation arrives, the question is not does this feel like an emergency, but does this match the list? That shift from feeling to rule removes the negotiation, and removing the negotiation removes most of the risk. Using an emergency fund for what it was designed to cover is not a failure. It is the system working correctly. But what happens in the days and weeks after the crisis passes is critical. When the pressure lifts, the urgency often lifts with it. The car is repaired. The medical bill is paid. The difficult period is ended, and the depleted fund, which now holds less protection than before, sits quietly in the background while other priorities compete for attention. This is where a common and damaging pattern takes hold. I will rebuild it next month. Things are tight right now. I will start again when I have more room. Weeks become months. The fund remains low, and when the next disruption arrives, it finds less protection than it expected. The rule that prevents this pattern is simple but firm. Replenishment begins immediately, in the next pay cycle, without waiting for a more convenient moment. The amount does not need to be large. The same automatic transfer that built the fund originally can rebuild it. Momentum restarts quickly when the behavior resumes quickly. And a fund that is reliably rebuilt after use is far more valuable than one that is only ever treated as permanent. The final and perhaps most important shift is in how you define success as you build. If success means having a full, complete, properly sized emergency fund, and anything less than that is considered a failure, then the journey is entirely framed as inadequacy. Most of the time spent building a fund is spent as someone who has not yet succeeded. That framing is both inaccurate and discouraging. A more accurate and useful measure of success is preparedness. And preparedness is not a single point on a scale. It is a continuous spectrum. Someone with $200 saved is more prepared than they were with a zero. Someone with 1 month of expenses saved is more prepared than they were with 2 weeks. Every increment of savings represents a genuine improvement in that person's ability to handle uncertainty, which means every increment is a genuine success. This matters practically, not just emotionally. Research in behavioral economics consistently shows that people who feel progress continue making progress. People who feel behind tend to disengage. The story you tell yourself about how well the saving is going has a measurable effect on whether you keep going. Tell yourself the accurate story. You are building, you are growing. Every contribution is real progress. The destination matters, but so does every step toward it. Here is something that rarely appears in conversations about emergency funds, but deserves more attention. The fund changes you before you ever use it. Once a financial buffer exists, even a small one, the quality of everyday thinking shifts. Small financial stresses stop triggering the same level of anxiety. Minor problems get handled instead of spiraled about. Decisions that used to feel urgent begin to feel manageable. This change in internal state is not a minor side effect, it is one of the primary returns on the effort of building the fund. Calmer thinking leads to better financial choices. Better financial choices lead to fewer expensive mistakes. Fewer expensive mistakes protect long-term goals. And the gradual accumulation of good decisions, made from a place of security rather than fear, is what financial stability actually looks like at the ground level. The number in the account matters, but the person who develops the habit, builds the system, and learns to make calm decisions under pressure. That is where the real value is created. If this way of thinking about emergency funds makes sense to you, the next step is simply choosing one thing from this video and doing it today. Not all of it. Not a perfect plan. One step. Maybe it is writing the definition of what your fund is for. Maybe it is setting up a small automatic transfer. Maybe it is opening a separate account and moving whatever you can into it right now. One action. Today, that is the whole assignment. If you found this video genuinely useful, consider subscribing to AR Investor for more calm, clear financial education built for people who are just beginning to take their money seriously. Leave a comment with which step you are starting with. It helps others who are watching to see what is actually working for real people. Thank you for your time. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.